Here's where I'd like to start.
Yeah.
You and I were conversating before that we even I hit record today, which I really enjoyed the conversation. And what I'm very, very curious about, because you alluded to it a little bit in the first part in before we hit record, but it sounds like your childhood had some really good elements to it. And it also had some pretty challenging elements to it. And what I'd really love for you to do is highlight both of those.
Fair. Okay. Yeah. So, you kind of asked, how was it growing up and some of that kind of thing. And, I guess I'm the kind of person and I think you are as well, but, where for whatever, I don't know how it happened exactly, but I'm almost a frustrating optimist, to people around me. Like I'm always like, it'd probably be fine. Everything's fine. It's going to be fine. Like we'll keep moving, and so I think that there were some great things about growing up, especially, and I know that, this being dad edge, obviously, we're talking about dads, right? And I often tell F3 guys even, hey, look, I get it. It's your dad's fault. Right. But now it's your responsibility. And so I look and go, okay, well, yes, it was my dad's fault that I, was miserable and, whatever. Right. And, but at the same time, it's my responsibility. So I look and go, were there great things? Absolutely. We grew up on a lake. I mean, like, my dad provided this incredible lifestyle, that was just impossible. We had boats and cars and, at the time you're a kid, you don't know any better. You just think, oh, this is kind of how everybody lives, right?
Yeah. This is what everybody has.
Yeah. I mean, so you don't know, but later you're like, oh my gosh, like I went water skiing literally every day, unless there was ice on the lake, that kept us from doing so. Like we went pretty much every morning. Like that's an impossible life. We had, we were in Boy Scouts. My dad was my one of my scout masters. And we'd had this incredible, these times we would go and do these great trips and all this kind of stuff. He was my wrestling coach. He was, so he was around and tried to do a lot of things. And I think it was actually probably as I got a little older and, it's funny how we were talking a little bit about, alcoholic fathers and, and some of this kind of stuff that you deal with, right? Even though a tenet of our faith is no alcohol, that's one of our personal beliefs. He was much better. Like if he would just kind of, if he would take the edge off, man, he was a lot nicer to be around, but since he was trying to live his faith and he was trying to do a lot of other things too, I guess, I don't know. But he was a pretty miserable guy for a long, long time. And so even though there were some of these good things, especially when we were younger, as we grew a little bit older and stuff, it got pretty bad. If I'm being real candid, Larry, like it I don't know if it was because it was kind of the, this sort of alpha male, button heads kind of a thing or what exactly, if there was perceived competition or some, I don't know what exactly caused it, but I knew I didn't like how things were going. I didn't like rules. I didn't like, being told what to do all the time. I didn't like control. And he's a very, very control focused person. And so when things got out of control or were beyond his control, then, it would really tighten the screws. To the point where it was either, it might be just yelling and screaming kind of stuff, it might escalate, past that. If he felt like that's what was required, I guess, to maintain control over the situation. And so, I tell my wife and kids all the time, they're like, hey, Dad, can we go trick-or-treating? And I'm like, heck yeah, let's go. Cause I was never allowed.
Wait, you weren't allowed to trick-or-treat?
No, bro.
Wait, that's abuse.
People are going to try and kill you.
It's very true.
They're going to put razor blades in your apples. That kind of like, what are you talking about? Yeah. Snow would fall. My kids would be like, Dad, can we play in the snow? And I'm like, go until, if your fingers start to turn blue, then maybe come in, but we weren't allowed to play in the snow. That was dirty and it was dangerous and it was bad. And, he didn't want the hassle and, whatever. Right. The ice cream truck pulls up in the neighborhood, the kids are like, oh, can we get ice cream? And I'm like, I'm knocking them over, to get to the door. Cause I'm like, we are getting ice cream because we were never allowed to do that. That was not a thing that we were allowed to do. Why? Because the ice cream man was going to kidnap you.
Only if he was in a white van with no windows. That's when
I don't know. Some of that music's pretty creepy, bro. I don't know.
Oh, that is very, very
so
cool.
That was the kind, it was, it was very control focused. So anyway, long story longer is that was what growing up was like. You never really knew what you were going to get from my dad. My mom was a very path of least resistance, so whatever she needed to do to not be the target, that was fine. She didn't care how much we got yelled at necessarily. She didn't care because she knew, she didn't like it necessarily, right? I don't think she was like, oh, finally, thank goodness, relief. But it was more like I'm going to have to deal with this later. He's going to beat the hell out of somebody, whether me or them. And so I'll deal with mine later. And right now we'll just sort of let that happen. Right.
You were one of 6, right? Combined family.
Yeah. We talked about that. Yeah. So, he's on it. My mom is his third marriage. There were 4 from my mom, and then he had 2 from a previous marriage. His first marriage didn't have any kids, but
just out of curiosity, it's kind of a different question.
Sure.
Yeah, and this is more of a question, I think, for the guys out there with blended families, right? Or maybe you grew up in a blended family. Did he treat the 4 of you differently than his own 2?
100%.
Okay.
Yeah. 100% different.
Yeah.
And part of it was, I think that, and now it's about to get real deep, Larry. But so his second wife actually committed suicide.
Oh my God! No way.
That was how that shook out. And I think there's a part of him that was angry about that. I don't know whether it was because he blamed himself or whatever it was, right? But he was definitely angry about the fact that this happened. And so my 2 older sisters reminded him, I think, of that relationship and all that stuff. And so he was worse to them in some ways than he was to the rest of us. But it was, it's hard. You got to be careful what you say, right? Because my dad's still alive.
Right.
If you were to ever hear this, I don't want him to get upset.
We're actually going to send this to him and tag him. No, I'm kidding.
Fine. We've dealt with a lot of things, whatever. But yeah, so I don't want to make it sound like he was just a horrible dude. I think honestly, he did the best he could with the tools that he had. He just had really bad tools.
Yeah. I think there's a lot to be said for that. And that's a lot of ownership and forgiveness, I think, on your part. I think all of us, I don't know if you did this. I certainly did, but I definitely went through this phase in my life. It was probably like a decade, in my 20s, maybe even into my 30s, like mid 20s into my 30s, like where I'd sort of hang my hat on that story of like, well, I can't have a successful relationship because, of all this stuff that I grew up with. Mom was married 3 times. Every guy she was with was a crazy abuser, like person, and yada, yada, yada. And I kind of hung my hat on that of like, oh, well, this is why I can't have successful relationships. But then, and there was a lot of resentment too, like from my own father, from my mom, but then you grow older, you start to have your own kids and you're like, you know what? Wow. Mom and dads, whatever I want to call it, your dad. That's like, wow, they're actually human beings. Right. And I actually have a choice, right? I can either realize that they probably did the best with what probably did the best job doing what they did with what they had. And to be honest, man, I would not want to be a father in the generation that raised us, because I think that, number one, there weren't hardly any resources, right, for dads to be better dads. And in fact, I think now it was, then it was even more taboo that if you had a dude that talked about like, hey man, like I'm really trying to elevate my communication, my connection with my wife. Like, how are you doing it? And the dude would be like, what the hell's wrong with you? Like, why are we even talking about it? Just go drink beer and not feel feelings.
Is she not understanding what unload the dishwasher means? Is that what you're talking about? Like that kind of communication? Like I'm not, like, yeah, exactly. Right.
But yeah, I think they did the best of what they had. And then I also think, I look at my grandfather, right? My grandfather was an amazing guy, but I also know my grandfather had high expectations for like my mom and his kids growing up. He was probably like, he's very strict and stern and it was black and white and that kind of thing. So I think, our parents were raised with that more like, hey, I provide and that's what I do. Right. That's just that's my job ends there. I provide and that's what I do. And I think what we're seeing though today is a generation of fathers like you and I, who exactly what we were talking about. It's like, man, I don't have all the information. In fact, I have a lot of lessons of what not to do, but man, I'm like crazy hungry to learn. And then as we're learning, we're also like, oh, wow, like, I wonder what dad would have been like had he learned this. Like maybe life would have been different for him. It makes me like, I look at my dad now, he's 73. He's a great guy. And my dad will tell you that some of the decisions he made, you know, he worst mistakes he ever made. I also think like I would, there's a part of me that I would hate to be that age and I missed out on those resources and different decisions could have been made or different skills could have been learned. But for you and for our generation, right, who were raised by that is like, hey, I'm also going to realize they were human and I'm going to forgive him because otherwise it's like me drinking poison and expecting him to feel the pain of that.
Right. Yeah, no, it's interesting you say that. I mean, and that, you know, honestly, it's funny that you brought up, I don't know if I've ever thought about him with different tools, like what would have been different,
right?
Like if he had been, I don't think I've ever thought about that. I've always just sort of said, this is what it is, you know, and for a long time I resented him. A long time I was mad, a long time, you know, whatever. Right. And I want to say it was, I don't remember, probably when I was about turning 40 or whatever, I finally was like, wait a minute. So who's the jerk here again? You know?
Yeah.
You know? And no, I mean, but I appreciate what you're saying because it's on the money, right? I mean,
it is.
He didn't know,
right?
He didn't know any better than I do. I
right.
mean, it's a lot less probably than I do, you know. And I had way more resources, and I have way more, you know, opportunity, and it's way more socially acceptable to do things in a different way.
Yeah.
You know, than it was when, and my dad's actually, you said your dad's 70 something.
73. Yeah.
73. Yeah. My dad turns 85 in about a week.
Wow.
So he's, you know, he was a little bit older when he got to me because we had two older sisters and all that. Right. So it, you know, so, you know, compound that, you know, like one more decade's worth of, you know, the same, he was born in 1937. Wow. So he, you know, yeah, he's an old dude.
You know, what's kind of crazy though, when you talk about resources is that, you know, I remember growing up, and you probably do too, that if you had parents that were in couples therapy and that information got out to your friends, oh dude, like, oh, you come from a broken home. Like, right? And now it's like, who is in therapy these days? In fact, you just pop open a Zoom and we go see a counselor, right?
Right. I was gonna say, in fact, I know a lot of folks, a lot of my friends and stuff who are like, oh no, we're in therapy. Like, we do it preventatively.
Yeah. Yeah.
We go even though there's nothing really wrong. Like they're just like, oh yeah, we just want to make sure our communication's, you know, optimal. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, there's no way in hell. Like, there's no way.
No. In fact, and the weird thing was too, is that I remember for a minute, like, cause I was dealing with some things when I was younger between my mom's marriages, and my mom put me in counseling. And dude, I don't think I ever told anybody that at that age, because if you tell somebody that you were seeing a counselor, like, you would be never invited to that lunch table again, and like an outcast.
Oh yeah, dude, you were crazy.
Yeah, you're a lunatic.
Yeah, there's something seriously wrong with you.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, let's right? Yeah. Well, let's fast forward to, you know, so, you know, here's you, right? And, you know, now 20 years of marriage, president of F3, 3 girls, 18, 16. 12, correct?
12.
Yep. 12. Yeah. And, you know, I don't think you come across to me as someone who is doing this job pretty darn well. Again, I mean, not all sunshine and rainbows, I'm sure, but like, you come across to me as a guy that is very important to you. How do you go about marriage with Tracy compared to maybe what you saw growing up?
Yeah. There's a guy used to work for me who, his mom had a phrase, and she was like, well, you can either be a good example or you can be a hideous warning. Like right. That's kind of your two choices. And I'm like, okay, maybe that's a little too bifurcated, but whatever. The idea is the same. Right. And so, you know, kind of growing up with a lot of examples of what not to do in my home. Fortunately, our faith, we're members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, right? So just kind of Mormon, right? As formerly known as, if you will. But And so we grew up, and my parents were never terribly active in their faith growing up. It was kind of an off and on sort of a thing. Like he would go and then he'd get mad at somebody, and then we wouldn't go for a while, or we'd go to a different church for a while, or, whatever. But he always had sort of a faith bent. He was always focused, on that was a good thing, that worshiping God was a good thing. Right. And so again, there were some good examples there. There were some not so good, but being a member of that faith connected me into a community that is very family focused. That's a huge priority, and it's really, we talk all the time about the nuclear family being the central, building block of humanity and community and all that kind of stuff. Right. That is a big part of our faith. And so putting me in that situation, then I was able to look and go, okay, well, at home, this is terrible. You never knew what you were going to get. It didn't matter what it was. And he was a little bit of a narcissist too. And so it's always about him and, whatever. And then I could also have this contrasting, examples, right, of other church leaders or friends of the family or whatever, who I would look at and go, now, see, I like that. Like, they seem functional. Why don't why don't I, kind of adopt some of that or try and pay attention to what they're doing? And so I did a lot of collecting, I guess, in my mind, of how to do it, how not to do it, and that sort of thing. And then at some point early on, I wasn't old, but I was a little bit older-ish, I guess. I'd finished college and all that kind of stuff. And so had my wife before we got married. So we were both, mid-20s. So, we'd been out on our own a little bit. We had, had jobs and that sort of thing. I don't think that's it's more typical now, I think, for people to get married a little bit older, mid-20s and late 20s is pretty typical now, I think. But, 20 years ago, it was, and especially in our faith tradition, like, it's much more typical. It's like, well, 19, 20, 21, that's not uncommon at all, for folks to get married that young in our world. And so being a little bit older, I think that helped too, because I kind of had some idea of what I did and didn't want. But the question you asked, though, was how do I approach life with my wife? Is that a fair?
Yeah, you got it. I mean, because you kind of had this template of some contrast, as you say, right?
Yeah.
But how do you go about it now? Like, what's most meaningful and important?
Somewhere early on, my wife hates this joke, but since I'm a dad, I insist on telling it because, hashtag dad jokes, right? But I always say we have been blissfully married for 19 years, married for 20. Because year one was the worst.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, tell me about it.
It was just terrible. Normal stuff of like, blending, backgrounds and, like, she was raised this way, I was raised that way, and she was raised in a very conflict avoidant type, household. And I was raised in conflict is really all there is household, and so kind of putting those things together. So the first year was pretty tough. And once we kind of got through that and had some experiences and actually, ironically, we both ended up being unemployed at one point. Jobs that we thought we had didn't pan out when we were moving and some different things. And so we got ourselves in a weird spot of, we had literally nothing to rely on except one another, because we both moved away from our families. Both families were far away. We had nothing outside, like no social structure, really in terms of like work or something like that to help, with our communication or anything. I mean, we were truly, totally reliant on one another. So I think actually that experience helped sort of solidify us a little bit. And we just sort of decided, I guess early on, for me anyway, it was a true burn the boats type situation.
So you guys went through a year where all you had was each other. So you guys kind of went through the fire a little bit together.
It was horrible. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. But, a lot like, and we'll talk about this more if we get that far in F3, we do these horrible, difficult physical things together because it bonds us. Right. And that difficult time together, I think, was a testing. It was a proving of saying, hey, are you going to get divorced? Because we thought about it, or are you going to, like, push through and like, just, persevere. And so, we just decided, I said, you know what, here's what I believe, and other people can believe different, certainly, but here's what I believe is, if this marriage is ordained of God, If marriage is an institution, is a holy institution that, that God is part of. Okay. So we take that as a premise. And then I say, okay, then my job in my mind as a husband is to pray to God unceasingly to change me to whatever it is I need to change to make it so that this marriage is solid. That is how I still approach it that way. And so in those times when I'm like, okay, this thing is happening and it is getting on my nerves, and, and I am really frustrated with it, or whatever it is, right? Something small like that, where it's like, okay, this is a source of frustration. I look and go, and we didn't know it back then, but now we kind of call it, are you familiar with the Augustinian Code? I don't know if you're familiar with that at all, but the idea that on the essentials, there must be unity. Okay. On the non-essentials, there's liberty. And in all things, there must be charity. Right. And so I approach my marriage that way, like if something's annoying me, is it essential? Is it one of the absolute essentials of our marriage in order for this for us to be good parents, for us to, maintain our relationship, to honor the covenants that we've made, together and with God, in our marriage, right? Is it one of those essentials? No. Oh, it's a cereal box sitting on the counter all day that you came home and saw, at the end of the day, was that essential? No. Okay. Then it doesn't matter. It's completely immaterial. It has no, whether my house is spotless all the time. Look, we live there, is it clean? Yeah. I mean, it's, is it picked up all the time? Pretty much. But you got kids and you got life and whatever. Like early on, those kinds of things would drive me nuts because I grew up in a house where control was super important. To the point where there were shelves in our basement that my dad had drawn outlines around the toys in crayon on these wood shelves so that the toys would be placed back in the exact right spot.
So you had like a crime scene for toys?
Yes.
I might take exactly, that idea, right? and just be a fool about it.
Oh yeah. It's total bizarro land, right?
Oh my God. Yeah. Dude, this is where the laundry basket goes.
But that's how it rolls, right? And so, you grow up with that, but then you kind of realize, okay, that if that's not an essential, then it is immaterial. And so I will allow liberty in that. Hey, look, you keep your side of the room, like my wife is not a neat person by nature. I don't know if she get upset with me saying that or not, but it's just not her deal. Because honestly, she has bigger things to worry about. That's what she, so if I care, Larry, then whose responsibility is it?
Well, it's gotta be you.
It's gotta be.
Yeah.
So if something's bugging me, it's not my responsibility to yell at them and tell them they need to do something different in order to serve me. I mean, and it's funny, but that's exactly how I was raised. And that's exactly then. And so I just look and go, okay, well, what's the opposite? Okay, we'll do that. It seems to work out pretty well, and so it was so the way I approach it is that Augustinian Code mindset, and with a complete dedication and a 100% burnt boat, kind of a mindset, and burning the boats, you arrive at the shoreline and because we ain't leaving. We're on the island. This is it, and that is, if I have to change something, then I'll change it. If we have to change something together, then we'll change it. We'll work on it together. If we can't communicate about it very well right now, fine. Then we'll figure out whatever has to happen will happen in order to make that work. And I don't know another way to do it, because I watch and say, 50 whatever % of marriages that are in decline and or ended. Right. And we were just talking before we even started, about 70% or 60% of single or of kids are in single parent homes.
Yeah. I don't know the actual percentages on that.
It's a grotesque number.
It's crazy. Yeah. A couple of quick things that I just wanted to just share really quick on that. So number one, I love how you use, so we're talking about marriage. And sure. The thing that I love that you use on that is that as a filter of how I'm going to respond, right? Which I think is gold, because if we really, really think about it, if we really, really break this down, there's a gazillion things that annoy any man or woman, right? If you're married, these things are going to annoy you. If you have kids, things are going to annoy you. Things are going to test your patience. There are things that are going to be obstacles and tests and those kinds of things. But a lot of times what's missing is that way to filter for if I could simplify that as much as possible is at the end of the day, does this freaking matter? Right? If I have a way to filter that in some way, shape, or form, I will, and I run that through that filter. I'm like, well, I'm going to respond differently, because if I see the cereal box, or in my case, no kidding around, man, true story. My 5-year-old, he still wets the bed. I went into his bathroom today. There is the soiled, wet diaper sitting right on top of his bathroom sink. Right now, I actually took a photo of it, and I filtered that through. Do I want to be pissed about this, or do I want to like take this as a moment, take a photo of it and be like, I could be pissed about this or think this is hilarious, but I have a choice. Right. And I chose to think it was hilarious, but and sometimes I'm not good at that. And the reason I'm not good at that is because I don't use a filter like that. I'll just react. Right. So I love that you do that. I also love that you have the burn the boats mentality. The thing that I'm so curious about, though, because I think probably as you said it, I'm very curious, and you got a lot of guys out there. And listen, man, I know you know what I'm talking about, and I see it all the time. And like, for instance, we have Dad Edge Alliance, which is our mastermind community, but then we have I also run another free group called the Dad Edge group. We have thousands of guys in there, and we're all part of. If you're a man, you're a part of other groups of dad groups and men groups and all that. Sure. And what I can tell you, man, and you know this, is that there are a lot of really freaking bitter dudes out there, like very, very bitter and unhappy. Right. For sure. And so I'm thinking about how you're talking about, I'm going to pray so I can change and morph into whatever it is that this marriage needs me to be. Right. And I think a lot of guys out there who don't have that type of mentality, they're probably sitting there thinking like, change. Wait, what? She should change. Right. Like that might be some of the things that they're thinking. So that takes a lot of humility to do what you do. And I want to dive a little bit deeper in that. So was that always so? Did you always be like, hey, maybe I should just pray so I could be the change that I want in my house?
Oh, hell no.
Yeah.
Yeah, no. Like I said, the first year, certainly not. Right. And once, I think some of it comes with maturity and time and that sort of thing. I really do. And looking and listening to good examples and all those sorts of things. Right. So there's a lot of input that helps that. But it definitely was not always the case. I mean, there were definitely times when I have, you sort of think it through and you're like, but wait, what about me? When do I get mine? But why do I always have to be the guy who, whatever. Right. And look, I like how you want.
I like how you morph into that. Like,
we'll call him Schmedrick, again. So little Schmedrick goes, right. But yeah, I mean, it's it's all in your mind. And I'll say it this way. I've done it both ways. Right. And most of us have on a number of different things. I've done it both ways. And I have worked to change other people, and I've tried to bring up other things, change other people to suit my needs. And then when I realized, oh, wait a minute, my life is not my own. As a dad, and this is something, Dave Redding, founder of F3, he wrote a book called Q Source, and there's a lot of F3 philosophy of leadership and things like that in there. And he and I, are very dear friends and have spent countless hours talking about leadership and talking about, being better men and all this kind of stuff. Right. And we say all the time, the sooner that you kind of come to this conclusion, or realization, or whatever you want to, whatever word you want to put in there. Right. But the sooner you kind of come to yourself and realize that you're not the king of the world, that as a father, back that up, as a husband, you have been transformed. There is no me anymore. There's only we, there's only us. And if you're talking about me, then you're going to end up me again. I promise. a promise. And so you made a decision somewhere in there. Now, maybe you made that decision because you thought, oh, she's hot. Okay, fine. You can get sex a lot of places. Fair? Right? You can, maybe you married her because you thought she was fun. You can have fun a lot of places. But if you take this relationship seriously and you look at it and say, this is a covenant relationship, we have made promises to one another, and I believe to God, right? If you did it in a church and it was sort of the typical, whatever, I mean, but regardless, if you're not a believer in God, that's fine too. But when you enter into that relationship with another person, you are now bigger than just you. And if you're there for just you, then stay you. Everyone's going to be a lot happier if you just stay you, if you're always focused on you. And that was another one of those things, growing up. I mean, I remember begging my mom at one point when I was in high school or college, I can't remember which, and I was like, will you just leave already? Like, just go. We'll all be a lot happier if you go, because he's only focused on him, and how it affects him and what his deal is. So, getting to that point where you're like, hey, look, this is a we. There is no me anymore. And then when you start having children, you recognize that now that I have been transformed, now my job is to sacrifice. My job, my life is now truly no longer my own, because these people can't survive without me. If you don't feed the kid, they have to have parents. They will not live if they do not have parents. And so now my job is to sacrifice everything I have. Dave always tells this joke, and he says, how much, I'm going to mess it up, but basically the idea is, he says, well, how much money do you give to your kids? Well, how much money do you have? Okay. How many kids do you have? Okay. Take that number, divide it by that number. And that's, you're not taking any of this with you, man. Every bit of it goes to them. And so guys that are sitting back right now and going, that sounds like bull crap. That sounds like a load of crap, because, she should be serving me and she should be meeting my needs, and I need to get this and I need to get that. If you take all of your needs and write them all down on a piece of paper, I'm dead serious, right? Write them all down. Everything you think you need, you must have, right? Write them all down make a big ass list, right? Put it all down on a piece of paper. Set that thing aside, stick it in an envelope. Forget yourself 100% and go to work for your wife. Sacrifice everything that you have, emotionally, mentally, everything, for your children. And I don't mean in the sense of like where a lot of guys go, that's what I do every day because I go to work and I work a lot of long hours and blah, 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 blah. No, man, that's just basic duty. You chose to live in that house. I can't help you with that. You chose to drive that car. That's your problem, right? You could do a lot of things different. You don't have to work those hours. You don't have to accumulate and consume the way that the world tells you to. You don't have to do that. Like, I know you think you do because that's what they tell you all the time, but it's a lie. Like, you can do it however you want. There's no one right way to do this, right? So moving all that stuff aside, if you take all those things you need, stick them in that envelope, forget yourself and go to work. Sacrifice for your wife, sacrifice for your kids. 5 years, open that envelope up. If you haven't hit every single one of those things or realize that none of them mattered, then, come talk to me. We'll reevaluate. But I promise, man, I've done it both ways, right? So approaching it this way is the most freeing, peaceful, centered way to approach this that I can even imagine. Because, when you're living for yourself and you're trying to figure out, how do I get more out of my wife, or why aren't my kids doing these things that I want them to do? Is it essential? Are you sure it's essential? And if it's not, then maybe let it go. Maybe relax.
So I just had a thought as you started talking that really did emerge. I don't know if you've given this any thought, or maybe you've given this a ton of thought. And what I'm saying is you're like, yeah, dude, that was the whole point. I'm really glad you got it.
I guess we'll see.
So I think what a lot of men do, I was guilty of this for the first half of my marriage. I've been married 18 years. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't until I started learning this stuff, because when I see posts from guys like in our group, in our communities and stuff like that, I do this, I work my finger to the bone. I do this, this, and this. All I want to do when I come home is like, I just want her to give me some every now and again, blah, blah, blah. So it's like, it's what Dr. Robert Glover calls in his book, No More Mr. Nice Guy, covert contracts. So and there's 3 of them, right? There's 3 covert contracts.
Okay.
One of them is, if I meet your needs, that means you'll meet mine. That's my expectation. If I meet if I meet your needs, then you will meet mine. No questions asked. Right. And so that's the view, right? We have this view of like, well, I'm going to burn everything out in my own mind, my own body. I'm going to sacrifice everything for the nobility of her and these kids and everything else. But at the same time, I better be getting my needs met. Like I have that expectation. Right. And then what happens, I think, is over time is men get pissed. We get pissed. For the first 9 years of my marriage, I was pissed.
Sure.
Like, God bless. Like I'm doing all this stuff. Like, it'd be great if I just get laid every now and again. Like that was kind of like, or it'd be great if this or that or ever happened.
Yeah, whatever it is. Right.
Or it'd be great if I come home and my wife's crap wasn't everywhere, things like that. Right.
Sure.
These expectations. So I had this view of like, well, I'm doing this, so I expect you to do that. And if those expectations are not being met, well, then I'm going to be pissed. And then I'll probably get a little resentful. And it's not even something that I was doing on a conscious level. Like it wasn't like I was out to go about my marriage like that. It was just something, unfortunately, that was happening under the surface that I didn't realize it was happening until I started doing work in personal development and growth. I'm like, oh crap, well, there's that. I was going about my marriage with all these expectations, with basically like a covert contract of like, hey, I expect you to meet my needs, even though you probably actually don't even know what they are because I'm really bad at communicating them. Right.
Oh, I forgot. Psychic has to be one of those on the list. Yeah. You also must be able to anticipate every need.
Exactly. Yeah. And but I think the way you're going about it is, I'm going to do these things because that's the way I am, and that's what's important to me. And that's what God has put me here to do. And, I'm going to do these things without expectation, and I'm going to do them because it's just part of who I am. And it's my job as a man. And then what I think that does to us inwardly, internally, is that we now project like, hey, I'm in this marriage. I love you. I care about you. And we are going to operate within our marriage to serve each other. But I'm not doing these things with the expectation that I'm going to get.
Yeah. It's an F3 thing. I think that's, where I got it, or where, it ended up in my brain. Right. Which means it was ultimately a Dave Redding thing. And, and so I hang out with him a lot. Anyway, he's a really smart dude. But this idea that my needs come later than everyone else's, and getting okay with that. What was the thing you just said, though? Dang it!
You're talking about the covert contract?
Yeah, that was part of it. But oh well. All right. Well,
if I fulfill your need,
make a note. We'll edit this part out. Yeah, but it was around that. It was about the covert contract and like stamp collecting of like, well, I expect this, or I don't remember what it was. It's fine. Move on.
It'll come back to us, but yeah. I actually, so I want to switch gears here a little bit. So there's 2 of the things that I do want to talk about. Number one is I want to talk about raising young girls, raising women. Well, actually women in your life. Now you have 18, 16 and 12. So, here you are, you had the upbringing you did. Some was good, some was not so good. Your faith is very important to you. You definitely go about your family and through the lens of what I would call Christ and fellowship and faith. But now you're raising all girls. So I would love for you to talk about like, hey, I actually have 2 questions. Number one is,
sure,
what have you learned about yourself raising girls? And I always like the question, what have your kids taught you? What have your girls taught you about you? And then second question is, what is most important for us men to be able to raise strong, confident, wonderful, happy human beings that are women?
Man. So what have I learned about myself from raising girls? And then what do I think guys need to know about raising girls? Is that kind of
raising girls? That's been a big question in our community in general.
Yeah.
Man, like guys, it's so important. I think guys enjoy raising boys, but at the same time, raising a young woman, young lady, it's some guys are like, hey, I'm really in tune with that. Like I kind of get that. And some guys are like, holy crap, dude, like I'm lost on that one. Like, where do I even start?
Yeah. I just remembered the thing.
Sweet. Let's go back to the thing.
Of course.
And then we'll go to the other thing.
I'm making this such a pain in your ass. I'm so sorry, Larry. I didn't mean to.
It's all right, Dark Helmet.
Appreciate it, press box. No, and I can't remember exactly how we were leading into it. I think it was something about, but it was about wives and living with your wife and that sort of thing. But the thing that I was trying to remember that I got to is the idea of a mission, though. I know what it was. The secret contracts, because you were saying like, okay, I'm ready. Yeah, I love that idea of secret contracts because, and I've called it stamp collecting in the past, where it's like, I have this secret little book, and I've got all these little stamps, and I'm going to collect, these are the pissed off ones, so I'll put pissed off stamps in there, whatever, right? But there's all these stories that you've made up in your head about the way that it ought to go, or the thing that you should expect, and you haven't communicated it, you haven't talked about it. She doesn't know, but you still have this expectation. I don't know where the expectation came from, whether it was, television or your parents or your buddies down the street who lie about their marriages, or whatever. I don't know. Right. But it came from somewhere. And so the problem is you're living by another man's expectation, and you're living by another man's rules, of what he says a marriage ought to be, or what the world thinks a marriage ought to be, or what, whatever it is, right? If you really get down to it. And this is something that my wife and I did early on too. And that is, we said, hey, look, we have a mission to accomplish as parents, not just duties or even tasks, although we have a lot of those as well, but we have a mission to accomplish as parents. And this actually, I think, has made some of the biggest difference, because then I can very easily look and go, well, is this missional? Is this essential? Right? That same kind of mindset of, well, then I can sacrifice anything that I need to, if I believe in the mission, and I believe in this person that, that is here to help me accomplish this mission that we have together as parents, as a married couple. Does that make sense? And so for us, it's, yeah. So for us, part of that mission has to do with raising children, but it also has to do with things, with regard to what our marriage looks like in assisting us to become those things that we believe God wants us to become. Not just to do things that we think God wants us to do. We get that, right? But to become something different, to become new creatures, as it talks about in the Bible, right? And so for us to do that, we laid it out. I mean, it's, it's a thing. Like, we have a family mission statement, and we work on it, and we think about it, and we adjust it sometimes, when we need to. And for different phases of life, sometimes it takes on a little bit different hue, if you will. Right. But I think that's one of the big things that we have found that works for us really well, and that keeps us from getting selfish. It keeps us from getting self-focused, because if we're focused on the mission, and I recognize that this is my partner to get me to where I'm supposed to go, then we can forgive each other a lot of garbage, because we're not here to get our needs met. We're here to get a mission accomplished. Does that make sense?
That makes total sense. And I think that's where a lot of the confusion lies. And to be honest, like, I got to tell you, man, out of all these episodes that I've done, that was one element that, if I puzzle piece a lot of the messages and a lot of the guests and things that people have said, what you just did was there was a lot of ideas, but hey, man, here's the filter where you view the everyday life through.
Yeah. What I think that's, and I think that's probably one of the best things about F3 and about hanging out with, Dave Redding and some of these other guys, that I get to hang out with is, whether they intend to or not, but putting things and providing a framework for us to sort of hang decision-making and hang, behavior and a lot of things, like having a solid framework that I believe is based in big T truth, is a huge, I mean, it shapes everything. It colors every decision. It colors everything that I do. And that my wife and I do, you know.
Well, we all need, well, not only that, you need the framework, right? You need things that are most important. Most importantly, too, is you need the right men in your life. And to be honest, like here are my thoughts, and you tell me if you think I'm crazy or wrong. But here I see a man, president of F3, successful entrepreneur, raising young girls, right? All daughters, operating within his faith, operating within his marriage at a very high level. I don't think you can do that alone. I don't think you can do that without the right men in your life who are there to elevate you, who are there to help you, who you are also there to elevate them when they need it, and also call you out when they don't see something that's necessarily in line with who you truly are. Like those corner men, that we call them.
Yeah.
And having that, there are so many men, and I know you know this because you probably see them in and out of F3, or you see them in F3 and how they used to be. But men, we like to live this quiet life of desperation and isolation. And I make it sound desperate as in like, oh, I'm desperate. But I don't think that the disparity is different. Disparity for direction. It's like, hey, I'm kind of desperate for the roadmap here. I'm desperate for the direction. And I'm desperate for people to basically link arms with me and help me walk this path, right? But we don't want to do that as dudes. We don't want to do that as men because we view that as like, well, if I have to do that, then, oh man, I'm not the strong lone wolf. Right. Well,
that's because we were raised by a bunch of guys, these narcissistic maniacs, because that's how they were taught.
Yeah.
We talk in F3 a lot about the Jack Reacher profile, the guy who, sort of, moseys from town to town and, does right by people and all this kind of,
you got these voices down, man.
You like that?
We need a name for each voice. But you know
what I'm saying? Like that's, and it's been glamorized to us and we think that's supposedly some way to live. And the fact of the matter is I call that kind of stuff like, Twinkie philosophy, right? It tastes amazing, but it provides no nutritional value whatsoever. Right. It's just garbage.
Yeah.
It's just garbage. So,
and not to totally change the subject, but man, Hostess, they don't taste like they did when we were kids. Like I tell my kids all the time, I'm like,
maybe they do, and maybe we've changed. I don't know.
Maybe I was like, man, it tastes like plastic now. But
they don't provide the same sort of, rush that they did when we were kids. That is for sure. For sure.
So, moving on to your girls. So, yeah, I really love to know what has been some big lessons that fatherhood has taught you as a person, or maybe these young ladies have taught you about yourself.
That's a tough one. I hate negative lessons, but you learn a lot of them, right? So you learn, I'm not nearly as patient as I thought I was, or stuff like that, right? You learn a lot of that kind of stuff. Maybe that's with any kids, but
it's like I could fish all day long, but the next time you leave your crap on the floor, right?
That's right. Yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah. Now I think first of all, let me just say that being a dad of girls is, for me, is the freaking best. I mean, I adore it. I love it. I love everything about it. It is horrifying so much of the time, especially as they hit teenager years and drama amps up and puberty amps up and, and all that kind of stuff, hormones and things that come along with all that. Like it's difficult. It's really difficult. In a lot of ways, but I wouldn't trade. I mean, I don't know what it's like. Of course, I have no frame of reference, right? So I say like, I wouldn't want to raise boys. Maybe I would, maybe they'd be great, but that has a lot to do with another determination that my wife and I made early on in our marriage, right? As we were getting ready to have kids, we heard all these people all the time talk about like, oh, well, they're just the best when they're 2, that's the best phase. And you're like, oh, okay, cool. And then when it's like, oh no, they're
fourth voice, by the way.
Okay, thanks. I'm glad you're keeping count. It's the best when they're teenagers, it's the best when this is the best when this. And we said, what if we just said, that's all BS and it's always just the best? What if every phase was literally just the best phase and we're just super excited for all of it all the time?
Yeah.
Like what if we just did that? And my wife was like, well, you're insane, but okay, I'll play, and and it works, right? So what have I learned about myself from raising girls? Well, and I don't know if this would be true of boys too. I imagine it probably would be, but I'll tell you this. I have learned more about a person's relationship with their creator than probably anything else. And understanding that relationship better for myself, and thus putting that, kind of trying to pass that down to them. Now, I don't know if I don't think it's unique to my faith. I think other people think this as well. But I recognize, and my wife and I, again, spent a lot of time talking about this and trying to make this decision, right? So whether it's girls, boys, or otherwise, but I recognize that I am a steward of another human being. This little person is going to grow up and leave my house and go make their own life and go and hopefully become, self-sufficient and hopefully smarter and better, than I am, right? Hopefully made an improvement here, or else what was I for? But so with that in mind, knowing that they're headed out to their own thing, and that is their ultimate destiny. They're going to spend a lot more years outside my house and outside my care than they are in, right? So I have this limited window to work within, but to look at my job as a steward of this other child of God, this other little person that exists. I'm the same kind of little person. Now I happen to be, in terms of my earth life, right? I happen to be a little bit further along, in years and experience than they are. But that's good, because then I can teach them and try and help and shape them. And so if I look at that and I say, I'm just a steward and I'm only here to help you to learn how to be a functional human being as best you can, right? And part of the way that I do that is by telling you I love you 75 times a day, and by, just pouring everything I have out into you, whether that's knowledge, whether that's love, whether that's caring, whether that's time, whether that's whatever it is, right? But truly trying to sacrifice everything I have to pour into you like that. That's what I learned, is that this is a sacrificial deal. I mean, that's probably the biggest thing that I learned, is that my life is not my own. I don't matter in the big scheme. What matters is my ability. And really, it's funny, but guys, look at this. All the work that I do, F3, church service, whatever these things are, all of those things are tools to use to try and shape me to become better, or to become more of what I'm supposed to be, so that I can come over here to these little people and teach them and help them and protect them and give them the benefit of, my failure, that I, that I have over here all the time. Right. And say, hey, don't do this or do that. And so raising girls, I've learned that, I think, is probably the biggest thing, is that sacrificial part, that recognition that what my true role in the universe is, in a lot of ways, as a dad, versus, anything else.
So it sounds like what you're talking about, community you have within F3, relationship with good men, the stewardship that you have within your faith, how you filter the world through, that the Augustine element that you talked about. Do you think that you would be going about life like this if you didn't have these positive things going on in your life outside of family?
Oh, zero chance.
Yeah.
Zero chance. In fact, and I meant to comment on it when you said it before, because, you talk about the Dad Edge Alliance and even the free community, all the different things that you have kind of going on to try and bring guys together to talk about this sort of stuff. Right. And we refer to, in F3, we talk about shield lock, and these are the guys, if you can kind of imagine that, remember 300, these, right. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, right. The Spartans, right? Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, and next to each other and building that, these are the guys that you go through life with, right? And I will say that even now, I mean, it's comical. There are things that I have a group of guys that I meet with every single week. There's 4 of us. And I wouldn't call it a mastermind, because it's different than that to me. It's almost like I don't even know how to describe it hardly, other than shield lock, because that's what it is, for us. Right. And we get deep, dude. I mean, we get super deep on the things that are going on. These guys know I have certain things that are blind spots to me, that I won't even recognize, that I'll screw up in a heartbeat if I'm not careful. I have certain things that are just always going to be a challenge for me. A lot of because how I was raised and, the baggage and the different things that come along with that. And now, it's to a point where, like, if I feel certain kinds of emotions during the day, like if something's really set me off or frustrated me or sending me off into my little dark hole where I want to suck my thumb and, and pretend the world doesn't exist or whatever it is, I get all up in my baby feelings is what I call it. I know that as soon as I start to feel that, I don't even think about it anymore. Hardly. I send a text to one of these guys, or I call them, or whatever it is, and I say, "Talk me off the ledge. Talk me off the ledge. Here's what's happening. Here's why I'm feeling this way." And sometimes they have great advice. So usually they just kind of go, "Okay, you done? You done? Pull your head out of your butt and get back to work. Get back to living." And usually that's enough. But yeah, no, if you are a man who thinks he can do it by himself, then you will, and you will be miserable. You will fail 10 times for every one success. I guarantee it. I guarantee it. You cannot, in fact, not only can you not, but you were not designed to do this alone. You're not supposed to. You've been lied to yet again, right? This idea, like we were talking about, like Jack Reacher, like the idea that this is a thing, and I see, in fact, I got off on one of these little YouTube, you go down a weird rabbit hole sometimes, you know how it is. I got off in this weird YouTube rabbit hole about tiny houses, and these people who like kind of like just disappear, they're like, "Oh, we live off the grid. We're in the middle of nowhere." And I think, oh, that's kind of cool. That's a pretty neat deal. That might be a cool way to live. But what I realized the other night is I was kind of going down, and I'm watching all these van rebuilds, and then I'm seeing men and women who are like, "Yeah, I live by myself now, and I have shut out all of that out there. I live in this van down by the river." Remember that one?
Oh yeah.
But I thought, what, that is a cool way to live, man. Maybe we should simplify to that point. And, maybe that would be really neat. And then the more I watch these people and I'm down and down and down this road, I was like, and I'm not trying to be judgmental or disparaging toward these folks. If this is what they felt like they needed to do, that's awesome. I watched it and I thought, if I did that, I would turn into a completely self-focused, raging a-hole quick. Because there would be no one around me to buffet my little, weirdo brain. You know what I mean? And I thought, that what a selfish, again, if it was me, I'm trying to turn this around. I think that of them too, but I don't want to say that because it sounds horrible and judgmental. But I'm like, what a bunch of self-indulgent babies. I built my van. Now I do. You're not contributing anything. Like, what good are you doing in the world? So the point is, if you want to do it alone, you're not doing anybody any good, least of all yourself.
Yeah.
So stop it. Stop it. It's the most frustrating thing to watch a guy. That's part of why I'm doing what, we were talking before we started, like kind of why you're doing what you're doing, why I'm trying to do what I'm doing. And there's some similarities to how we're approaching life because we know it. We figured out that part. I haven't figured out a lot of stuff, but I figured out that part. I ain't doing this by myself, and neither are you. Ain't gonna work.
Yeah, a couple of quick reflections, man. First of all, when you said, if you want to do this by yourself, hey, you can. And you'll be miserable. Like if I could take that clip and just replay it, because that might
be the only good thing I've said this whole time.
You'll have one success for every 10,000 failures. That's very true. When I think about having the right guys in my life, it's what mistakes am I avoiding by learning through by the roadmap that these other guys are leading me through their own experience, right? Yeah. Also, what opportunities have I potentially missed had I not been like, tapped on the shoulder, be like, hey man, don't miss out on that. Go do that, right? The other thing too is I too have gotten caught up in like watching like people building off the grid, and I'm like, oh man, it looks kind of cool, right? But then like, it's funny, like my wife and I were talking about that. I was like, man, that'd be kind of cool, like living out in the middle of nowhere. And she's like, yeah, it'd be cool for about 4.5 minutes. And I'm like, that's what I was thinking. Like, like right away. Like, I kind of wonder, like, after you watch those shows and the house is built and the couples in there, like, and they're like, yeah. And they're like, now what do we do? Right. It's like, like the end of Finding Nemo when they're all like in the plastic bags and they're like, all right, now what do we do?
Okay. Wait, what? Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, I can't imagine. It's like you can only look at each other in your 300 square foot tiny house in the middle of nowhere for so long before you're like, oh, wow, I really do miss people. Like to some degree anyway.
Yeah. But, are you, Ryan Mickler, Order of Man? Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I figured I don't want to presume, right. But, now here's a guy who went and is, lives on whatever it is, 500 acres. I don't know how much it is, 50 acres or whatever it is, like, in the middle of nowhere and that kind of thing. But he's constantly looking for ways to contribute. He's still constantly looking for ways to give back and to be an asset, to be part of the community, be part of the thing. Right. So I'm not saying, living off in the middle of nowhere is bad. I'm just saying, as I watch these people, shrink their lives to where it literally is only about them anymore. To the point where, Ryan just finished building some big barn out in his middle of nowhere so that he can have people there. Right. But these folks that are just, they're just diminishing and diminishing and diminishing until it's just about me and nobody else. And that's one of the traps I think that we fall into as men, is we become, because we believe that there's an arrival. We believe that at some point, again, I think it's a lie we've been sold that, that we were supposed to, at some point, well, if I worked this many years at this job and I accumulated these kinds of possessions and I had this many children and those children did these activities and, if I did all these things at some point around our age, right, or between 45 and 50, we would have been like, okay, sweet, done. I can coast now for the back half.
And you realize you don't want to coast.
Well, you and I realize that maybe, but a lot of guys get at the top of that hill and start thinking, wait a minute. What? What's next? What? Right. It's like this is all there was.
Yeah. I had a good guy come on the podcast, Aaron Walker. He's good friends with Dave Ramsey. He's been in a mastermind with Dave Ramsey for 25 years. He retired for the first time at 27. And he said it when he came on this podcast. He's like, there's only so many Mai Tais you can drink on the beach and then you're just done and you have to go be productive. You have to go create something new. You got to do something else that's for the good of people. Right. And he's a big faith guy too. And, well, man, I have thoroughly enjoyed this. This has been a lot of fun. I want to make sure that the guys really understand we have a lot of listeners, man, who are F3 guys.
Sure.
And, so they already get it. But for the guys who don't know much about F3, explain what F3 is and how these guys can maybe get plugged into their local chapter.
Sure. 100%. So F3 is an accidental movement. It was never intended. It was not started with any intention. It was started for some guys. Well, honestly, it was started for guys that just like me when you read in the bio, right? Where we said, hey, you know what? I think I'm tired of being fat.
Right.
So I think I'll go work out. And if I can be more consistent working out with some buddies, that'll be cool. And so it's this accidental movement. It stands for fitness, fellowship, and faith. And, out of the gate, it was not called F3. It was just a workout, or whatever. Right. And I think what happened is over time it evolved and there was an understanding that once we started bringing men together and started getting them some friends, not like the friends of like, oh, well, my daughter and your daughter are friends. And so I guess by default we're friends.
Yeah. We should just hang out.
Yeah. Not that kind of friend. Right. But like where it was like, oh, these guys have actual common interests and, we bonded over this very difficult physical thing that we've done together, whatever it is. Right. So once we got them together and started realizing, hey, we got some friends, I actually like my life better now because I have people around me that guys that I can bounce stuff off of, guys that I can, whatever, right, hang out with. And then it kind of evolved into the faith part. And for us, faith is not a particular faith, a particular denomination. It's not even necessarily a full-on acknowledgement of a God, right? You bring whatever you have, whatever you believe, whatever your faith tradition is, or if you have no, religion or faith at all. If you believe, as Dave often says, if you're a Bob Dylan spiritualist and believe the answer is blowing in the wind, that's fine, brother. We don't mind, right? You bring whatever you have. Faith for us is just an acknowledgement of just like what we were talking about before, and that is that you're not the king of the world. If you can acknowledge that there are things bigger than you that you must submit to, a collective of some kind, a God, a whatever it is, right? If you can bring that, that's faith. It's a belief in something bigger than yourself. Right. So these guys started getting together and they were like, hey, what if we actually did some good stuff? Like, what if we went and did like a habitat build or like, whatever it might be, right? Cleaned up some yards or, adopt a highway or whatever. Right. So they started seeing that like bringing the men together was affecting the communities. And so ultimately, and this is where I think Dave Redding shines. He's the ultimate articulation machine. Like again, that's why he's an attorney too, I imagine, right? Because he can take and see what is, and then explain it in a way that you can get it no matter what, right? And so he's seeing these patterns, he's seeing all these things, and he goes, "Okay, I see what's happening here. We are going to continue to plant and grow and serve these men in these workout groups because the workout is what brings them together, right?" Because his frustration in life was, I'm sick and tired of men being crappy leaders. He had been in the special forces. He knew what good leadership looked like. He knew how he thrived under good leadership. And then he realized, oh, no wonder the world's not thriving because we have terrible leadership everywhere. Right. So he started something accidentally with the intention ultimately of that. I mean, that's our mission. That's what we live for in F3 is to plant, grow, and serve men's workout groups in order to invigorate male community leadership. I mean, that's the, I didn't read it off. It's baked in there now. Right. But that's what we're there for. And so what we do, and really where I think we do our best work is it's for guys like me. It's for guys like you. It's for guys like us who are, for whatever reason, it's your dad's fault, but it's your responsibility. We joked about that earlier, but whatever that hole is in your heart that you're bringing to the table, we help you get around other guys so you can fix it. Mm-hmm. So you can figure out how to fill it. You can figure out what your purpose is in life. And so you can stop feeling this horrible, empty blackness, this gnawing inside, knowing that you were meant for more, but you're not living it, because you don't know how. And you think you're supposed to do it by yourself. All these lies that you've been told for your whole life, like you can reject all of that. Come with us. We'll show you. Mm-hmm. You can get rid of all of it and you can just come be part of the guys. And, Dave said, and I've said that too, many, many times, like, look, if knitting was the thing that brought us together, then we would be a knitting group. If painting was the thing that brought us together, then we'd be a painting group. Just right. So happens that for men, it works out better for us to be in shape. Mm-hmm. That's what we're supposed to be. Anyway, we're supposed to be strong. We're supposed to be useful. We're supposed to have kind of that very functional fitness level. So that's why we ended up on that, just because it works.
And there's an element too, that when I share pain with you and I'm shoulder to shoulder with you,
oh yeah,
and we're supporting each other, you're like my swim buddy, or I'm helping you, or I'm doing something, right? Vice versa. Mm-hmm. There's a bond that happens, right? That's unspoken.
Oh, for sure. I mean, we have an acronym, the CSAUP is what we call it, CSAUP, right? Completely stupid and utterly pointless, right? And a CSAUP event is essentially like a mud run or like a Spartan race or something like that, where it's like, what's the real point of that? No, there's no point. There's no point except for getting dirty, doing something a little bit dangerous, and going through that gritty, tough thing with your buddies. Yep. You run this thing together with your friends, and at the end, you have war stories to tell.
Yep.
And that's and then you're bonded.
That's true, man.
Yeah.
Yeah. So as we record this podcast, just to segue just for a minute.
Sure.
I always encourage guys to go feel a little bit of pain with their kids, right? To go get dirty and sweaty with their kids. As this show airs in February, we're already 2 weeks past this, but as we record this, I'm 2 weeks before it. I'm taking my 14-year-old out to LA. Well, not LA, Chino Hills, California, for Bedros Keuilian's Squire program. It's a 15-hour rite of passage for fathers and sons. And I don't know, as you and I are recording it, I don't know what to expect. The only thing I know for a fact that happens in that 15 hours is he and I are submerged together in an ice bath for I don't know how long.
Beautiful.
Holding hands and all that. But I do know we're going to go through some pain together. Oh. We're going to learn things about being, transitioning from boyhood to manhood.
Yeah.
I'm going to be able to meet myself a little bit. He's going to meet himself. We're going to meet each other. and we're going to go through some pain, together. I know that much, and I can't wait for it. And as this show airs, what I can tell you is, I haven't gone there yet, but as we look to the past, I loved every minute of it. So
I was just going to say, you want to know what to expect? Expect greatness. That's what you need to expect. Because what you're talking about is something that's hugely missing in our culture today anyway.
I agree.
Is rites of passage and transitionhood from boyhood to manhood. Right now, the transition from boyhood to manhood means you moved out of your kid bedroom upstairs into your basement, your parents' basement downstairs. Like that's not a transition to anything.
And you got a phone.
Yeah. Okay. Good job. Way to go.
That's the fifth one.
And that is one of the that is one of the big differences though between raising girls and raising boys too. We kind of alluded to it before, but a rite of passage for a girl is vastly different than it is for a boy. And like there is something very attractive to me in my mind. I'm like, yeah, I think I'll take the 18-year-old. We'll jump in an ice bath. She'd be like, you're nuts. There's no way in hell that's happening. This is not going to happen. Right. So, okay. Yeah. But the rites of passage aside, just to kind of come back to one of the things you said, because I love what you're talking about as far as like the experiential piece, right? Is going through a thing together, experiencing a thing together in order to bond. For me, I've been more successful at it at times than others, right? And as they got older, it got tougher because they started doing more stuff. But again, I don't know where all these ideas come from entirely. I know I stole them from somewhere because I'm not smart and I wouldn't come up with it myself. Somebody told me to do this somewhere along the way, and I just sort of tried to do it, right? But for us, the experience with girls is I took them on dates, and I tried to do it once a month, and I tried to do it, and just convenience, so my idiot brain can remember. I would just say, okay, my oldest birthday is on the 6th of January. Okay, so every 6th. And or the Friday or Saturday nearest to it, right? That was just her time, and that was the experience that we went through together. Now, for me, the suffering was they would make me go to Olive Garden, and I freaking hate that place because it's like the Walmart of food. But whatever. So the pain was mine. They loved it. They're like, Dad, this is so fancy. Anyway, but yeah, okay. Eventually, we'll get you better food. Now they oldest wants sushi on our next date. So, okay, we can live with that. Right. But
there you go.
But the point is that, you provide some sort of experience and as a dad, that's part of your job, right? For boys, yes, it's going to be because what you want him to learn, your job is to teach him how to be a man, right? I feel like my job is not to teach my girls how to be a woman. I think that's my wife's job because she knows how to be a woman. I don't have any idea. Right. But what my job is to teach her, this is what a man looks like. This is how a man acts. This is how a man treats you. This is who you are in relation to the world, to the universe. This is what your body is for. This is how, all these kinds of things. And so when you get to the point where you start going on dates, you start thinking about, because again, you're going to spend a lot more of your life with some dude that you haven't met yet than you are with me. Right. That's very true. My job is to prepare you for that inevitability, for that time when you're going to be going on a date. You better know without any equivocation. Oh, no, friend. Like you ever discern very quickly and go, I'm sorry, this isn't what a date looks like, buddy. That's not, my dad taught me different. Yeah. I know what this is supposed to be. What's that?
Raise the standard.
Oh yeah. Hopefully make it unreachable. Right. No, I'm just kidding.
Where you're going.
Yeah. No, but doing what you're doing, I love that so much because essentially that's what a date looks like with your son, versus going to a restaurant or going to, when they were young, it was always like, Dad, we want to go to the Disney store. So we, whatever, fine. Right. Do whatever they wanted, at some level. And then it evolved, over time to where it was like, and this is another thing that guys don't get is they think that it's like, well, I took them on the date. What do you want from me? Like I'm doing the things. No, friend.
Yeah. Don't check.
You have to go to Olive Garden for 10 years, every month for 10 years. So that when they're 15 and 16, then when you're taking them to a decent restaurant or you're taking them somewhere else, the point is that you've laid a foundation. You don't get to pick which one of those dates is going to be the amazing one where you have this incredible breakthrough and you really get to bond with your daughter and you get to teach her, this credible thing or whatever it is, right? You don't get to pick which one that is because you just don't know when it's going to happen. So you have to be painfully consistent all along. And the only way you can do that, Larry, is if I'm living a sacrificial life.
Very true.
Right? If it's about me, it ain't gonna work.
Mm-hmm.
But if it's about them, and I can give all of that over, and I can say, yeah, my time is yours. It doesn't belong to me. It doesn't belong to me. And guys can listen to this and they're going to be like, that guy's a wuss, or what, I don't know. They think whatever they want, but I'm telling you, man, this is where the peace lies. This is where the centeredness comes. No matter where I go, I know why I'm supposed to be there. Mm-hmm. You can't move me. It's not because I'm so great. It's just because I've built this over time from listening to guys who are better than me, that are smarter than me, and then trying it and failing and and keeping it going. Anyway.
No, man, this has been awesome. And I think there's been so many gems that have come out of this podcast. Number one, if I could just quickly review them, is your past doesn't define how you're going to show up as a parent or a man, right? How you were raised. The second thing is the St. Augustine, what I would call filtering your responses through, right? Is this is this essential, right? Is this mission critical? Even the things that might get under our skin, right? Is this even worth, getting upset about? The other thing too is how you go about marriage, praying and being what I would call a servant leader, right? Through the eyes of Christ, through your faith, right? To be the man that you were meant to be. And also raising the bar very, very high for your daughters, right? Because the cool thing and I've seen this before, the cool thing about fathers like you that put the time in, not just check the box, right? Put the time in, and you mentioned the word consistent, is that when they go out into the dating world, they're going to spot a bum from a mile away and not going to have any tolerance for it, which is great. And then the final thing is that, you can do life all by yourself if you want to. You have all the freedom to go do that, but you're probably going to be miserable doing it. And I got to tell you, I spent the majority of my 20s and a little bit into my 30s living that life, and it was no fun. Life didn't get good until I started surrounding myself with other and the key here too is the like-minded men. If you want to surround yourself with guys who are miserable, calling their wives the old lady and bitter and expectation, well, guess what? That's probably what you're. Yeah, that's going to be you. So you got to decide who the people that you're hanging out with. If that's what you want to evolve into, like you said, it's your choice. But man, I've really enjoyed this.
Oh no, yeah, thank you. Go ahead. Sorry, I was going to cut it off and just say, it's funny because you said like-minded men. I wanted guys to hear this, and that doesn't mean you have to agree on everything.
Right.
We can have different opinions, and we can, whatever. But the idea that we're all headed in the same direction, we're on a similar mission. We're trying to get to the same place.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm with you.
Well, this was awesome, man. I imagine if guys want to know anything about F3, what they want to do is they want to go to F3 Nation.com. Yep. They'll find everything there, correct?
F3nation.com. That's right. Come and look, there's no process. There's no paperwork. There's nothing, man. You go to the map, find one near you and show up and say, hey man, I'm an FNG, friendly new guy.
FNG. I remember being FNG.
Yeah. And they'll take good care of you.
Yeah. And they do. I've been to quite a few F3 workouts. They're a heck of a lot of fun. That's why my nickname is Press Box, because I'm on this microphone. So, well, guys, if you want to connect with Frank, if you want to check out F3, not to worry. It's kind of funny, Frank, as I say this. You go to thedadedge.com/Friday 37. Friday.
Hey,
what's up with that, right? Friday 37. We'll have all the links for Frank, all the show notes. We'll also have an application in there for the Dad Edge Alliance for you guys as well. But Frank, man, this was awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you, man. I hope it made some semblance of sense.
Somewhere it totally did. So, It was good stuff, my friend. Thank you. Thank you for all your transparency as well.
Appreciate you, Larry.
You bet. All right, gentlemen, go out, live legendary. Take care.